everybody for coming, just like Don did. Welcome to the 6th class in our Certified Indoor Gardener, hosted, of course, by Pam's Gardens in the Grow Store. Tonight we're going to do some exciting stuff. I brought a lot of fun toys for us to walk around and look at and talk about. We're going to discuss hydroponics, and we're going to discuss air and air movement. And how many of you are currently growing hydroponically? All right, that's a good amount. How many of you currently know how a fan works? Oh, come on, we got it. You plug it in and it blows that way. So, okay, good.
All right, so.
Well, amen. So,
Okay,
so basically, with hydroponics, we want to know, does anybody here know what hydroponics means? What the definition of hydroponics is? It means water working. That's exactly correct. That's exactly correct. And tonight I'm going to display several different methods of water delivery, hydroponic water delivery, hydroponic systems, and we'll discuss the pros and cons of all of those things. So let's see. Also, we're going to discuss air movement and the air movement devices, and the pros and cons of those as well. Growing hydroponically can mean many different things. We cut clones, we put them into rock wool or cocoa like we've done in our class. That is growing hydroponically. Hand watering a plant that's in any type of a mineral mix like perlite and vermiculite or cocoa, that's also hydroponics. I move this out so we can see it. The Sunshine 4, anything that involves us using an inert substrate typically constitutes a hydroponic garden. You know, anytime you're not using your media to get your food, your soil to get your food, then you're probably growing hydroponically one way or another. Basically, for hydroponics, all the nutrition for the plant is contained within your nutrient solution. Everything else is inert. So you're going to put all of the dietary needs for that plant, whichever phase of the plant it's in, whatever kind of plant it is, and you're going to pH adjust it for availability for the plant and have it all delivered through the root system, but again, through the solution, not through leaching of the soils or medias or anything like that. Hydroponic systems are typically identified by the delivery method of the nutrient solution. And what I mean by that is, there's a million different kinds of hydroponics, but really there's only two kinds. There are active and there are passive. And for instance, an active system would be a system where the nutrient system or nutrient solution is delivered directly to the plants. A passive system would rely on capillary action or wicking action to deliver the water to the plants. So if you've ever grown using a wick system or using rock wool, piled on rock wool, using all coconut, where basically the substrate or media has a wicking ability to it, that is a passive system. Active system could be anything from, air pump bubbling the solution to keep it fresh, a water circulation pump delivering the solution and returning it back to a controlled area like a basin or a reservoir. And there's your big differentiation there, And there's pros and cons, of course, to using both. With an active system, you're going to get more growth and faster growth just based upon the aggressiveness with which you're watering. If you're using a passive system, you're still going to get a steady growth because you're using the hydroponic fertilizers, but it's going to grow a little bit slower because it's not so actively being fed. It's just taking as it needs, So basically, I have a few systems at the rear of the class. Let's see if I can get y'all to kind of shift it back here. Okay. So this lovely ornamental pepper plant that I have here, I believe this is a Bolivian ring, ornamental. Anytime you see purple pepper flowers, don't eat the peppers. It's a bad sign. So this system works with a beige reservoir on the bottom, a 4-gallon reservoir, which holds all of the nutrients. And then it has a 2-gallon top growing chamber, which basically holds all of the roots. Within that system, that's full of water, otherwise I'd be hoisting it high. All right, there we go. It's all 40 pounds. So, basically, water is stored on the bottom and delivered to the roots up above in the red container via an air pump. And the way that works is air is pumped down and released into the bottom chamber in a straw. And where normally you would see a water bubble, or an air bubble I should say, rise to the top, because it's done it with a straw, it creates a siphon behind the rising bubble of air. So that then brings water to the drip ring, which we see surrounding the main stem or meristem of this plant. So when I supply air down this tube, it forces water back up and to drip out and all around the root system. Typically this is run 24/7. This is an active hydroponics, and it is also a drip method of hydroponics. These are very popular because they're very low maintenance, and you can actually grow quite a large plant in them.
I want to say that I was growing roses in one of those. I had it on a timer. So
And how did they do?
Oh, it loved it.
Prolific. Was it
Yeah.
the little baby roses or big roses?
Big roses.
Nice, nice,
I love
right
it,
on.
yeah.
I love roses. That's one of the things that got me here. So this is an active system, and you're typically looking at with the media to surround the roots, which is the hydrogen pebbles, the clay pebbles, with the nutrients and the pump included. This kit is right around $69, $65, depending upon where you pick it up. We have it here. I highly recommend it. It's typically used for single plants or for mother plants. Another, I'm sorry, what's it called? This is a water farm by General Hydroponics. And I left everybody a little booklet on the table because a lot of these things are offered by this company, General Hydroponics. That's the manufacturer of this bucket. Yes.
Do you have to keep constant pressure on that bottom tank to keep it forcing up, or will it act?
No, you do. There's no
How do you-
wicking
how
or
do you do that?
gravity. With an air pump, a aquarium style air pump, little bitty air pump that would force air through a tube to bubble a bubbler inside of an aquarium.
Right.
Same thing, just without the air stone. Just the straw goes all the way down into the water level.
Okay,
And
so you're
forces
actually
the water back.
pressurizing that bottom one to force the water back.
Precisely correct. Precisely correct.
Bluetooth your water levels?
Yeah, and on the side here, it's a good top. You can see there's a blue piece of tubing. I'll hoist it up again. This blue tubing actually is a water level indicator tube. What that means is, since this is opaque, looking at the blue tube, it will share the same water level as the rest of the reservoir. That way, without having to lift up the main unit, I can actually tell whether or not my water is low or high, and you can see that there's a water indicator mark on there telling you what your ballpark should be. I also have these buckets here. These wonderful buckets are actually a bucket within a bucket. They work a very similar way where your top container holds the plant, holds your root system, typically holds an inert media. Usually, again, the hydrogen pebbles or baked clay pebbles. Very good and very reusable. With this system, the one way that it differs is that it circulates water through the bottom of the pumps, or the pots I should say, and then returns it to a reservoir. So this is more of a flood and drain style system, because the plants will be sitting dry, a timer will actuate, pumping water to the units. They'll be allowed access to water for typically 15 minutes, and then it pumps it away, taking it back to the control or to the basin or reservoir. This one in particular is a multi-flow and goes with 6 units for plants or 12 units for plants. It's expandable. Very popular. I personally like it just because it gives you kind of an individual unit, but still automated with a system, so I can walk away even further because it's tied to a big 55-gallon barrel reservoir. So that one right there typically is known as ebb and flow or flood and drain style hydroponics, but not your normal format. When we think of flood and drain style hydroponics, we typically think of a reservoir and a tray. So I brought that out here. So what I have is a 10-gallon reservoir and a 10-gallon tray. And we can see that the plumbings are fitted through the lowest end of this tray. Typically I would fill the reservoir up, have a submersible water pump, which is on a timer, under the water level, and I would plumb that pump directly to this tube. And so every 15 minutes of every 2-hour period, so 2 hours, nothing, and then for 15 minutes, the water is actuated. And what that does is the water starts to come in at this lowest point and fill up, slowly rising around the plants as their pots and roots add to displacement. And so then the plants are sitting again in a flooded table, if you will, for 15 minutes before the pump turns off and the water just backwashes down the way it came. And you can see this large piece right here. This is an overflow. This is your overflow drain. Just like in the hand sink in our bathroom, you have the small hole so that if the sink fills up, it will only go so high and then it'll return. That's what this does. If the water gets too high, it'll just return into the basin so that we don't have any flooding issues outside of the system. I really, really like these flood and drain style systems because they allow me the mobility to move the plants around within the system. Whereas some other systems, you're relegated to the locations you're already in. All right, moving right along. So this is what's known as a deep water culture bucket. So you have your standard 5-gallon or 3-gallon bucket. You'll notice that I did not use an orange Home Depot bucket, and none of these products are very colorful as in red, yellow, orange. You don't ever want to use any hydroponic products that light can shine through or that is the color of a flower, which would in turn attract insects. So that's why you see a lot of colorful pots, but in indoor garden supply, you'll only see green, black, white, very neutral or solid colors that won't attract pests. In this system, I typically would fill the 5-gallon bucket up at least with 2.5 gallons, if not with 3 or 4 gallons. I would use this lid, which has been fashioned into a net pot, to contain my plant, and you see that I've put a piece of rock wool in there to simulate rock wool being holding a plant. Basically, it dangles just above the water. You snap the lid on. Some people will put a bubbling air stone using an aquarium pump. Let's see if I can do this, people. There we go. Be smarter than the bucket, right? And this is very passive. It has a bubbling pump, but the water delivery is just straight from the roots wicking it up. A lot of people like these because they're individual units. You can move them around the house, and this probably costs $20 total. This is $5 to $7. This is $5 to $7. So very thrifty, very approachable in that manner. Deep water culture. So this is a Garden of Ease. A Garden of Ease kind of combines a lot of these features. The bottom piece is actually the reservoir, and you can see it's got kind of a terracotta color to it, to where you could place it on your patio or porch, use it outside, and it won't be such of an eyesore. This one has a pump in the middle, which works like a fountain, like the fountains we see everywhere. Water shoots up, touches the lid right here in the center, and then splashes the 4 areas for growth, here, here, and here. Typically you have a net pot similar to that just dangles in the chamber, and water is splashing on it all the time, so the roots chase out of the pot, looking for the water, and then eventually down into the solution. This is another very popular method. This is typically considered an aeroponic method because of the way it's spitting the water. So this is a very good system I really like, because every time you buy one of these, a little bit of the money goes to Hydro for Hunger, which is basically a foundation that feeds the homeless. So very popular in that regard. I have another passive system here. This is the earth box. The earth box is very akin to a trough. And what I would do with this system is fill the top of it with a media of some kind. Cocoa, sunshine, it could even be potting soil. But I would typically fill it up just like a window planter. And right here in the corner, there would be a straw that sticks out, so that I can water specifically down the straw, filling only this part of the box with water. Everything else being kept above the water level. But you can see there's indentations, let's make sure I'm pointing the right place, in both corners. And this allows for the media then to work capillary action and suck the water up from the lower level to the top level, keeping all the plants evenly watered. So, and there are quite a few pros and cons with these. So let's take a quick look. Okay, so this garden right here, the earth box. Pros and cons. So we know how it works. It is a passive system which works on capillary action to draw the nutrient solution from the lower level up to the root zone where the plants inhabit. With a system like this, you're typically going to feed it organics or lighter solution of fertilizer. You're not going to go too heavy because it's sitting for so long with the fertilizer in there. You don't want it to stagnate or separate out. Weekly maintenance on a product like this, there's really very little maintenance you do because the dirt is in there or the hydroponic media is in there, so you're not really able to separate the two areas anymore. So really you're just going to make sure that your water level is in there, that your nutrients are in there, and once a week you would typically add to. With a system like this that's so passive, you fill it up today, 7 days later you top it off with plain water, allowing it to come back to full, absorb any more remaining nutrients, and then the next week you would then go back to feeding it a nutrient solution. Yes, ma'am?
Ted, would you recommend distilled water?
I typically do not recommend distilled water. Distilled water, while from an artist standpoint, is akin to a blank palette, so we really like that. It's a very clean water source. Unless you have a filter at your home that provides you with that, it can get costly over time, especially if you're growing flowering variety plants, tomatoes, cukes, and peppers, because they will start to very much blow through the water, and you'll be running to the Costco for those 2-gallon sized water bottles all the time. So I typically recommend a purified or filtered water, but not so much the distilled water, just because it's cost prohibitive. And lastly with this unit, pros and cons. Okay. Anything that waters itself without an automated system is going to be passive, which means it's going to grow slightly less aggressive than something that's watering itself all the time through a water delivery method apparatus like a pump. So this one, slow and steady, very thrifty, I really like it, but not super quickly growing. Sir?
That won't promote root rot because it's sitting in the water all the time?
It has this screen, if you will, so the bulk of the moisture will stay low, and just in this corner and in this corner, you'll see the moisture very heavy, but then below the surface is where it'll be wicking to the plants. So, no, typically you wouldn't see a rot. If you put very, very small seedlings in here and then filled the system all the way up, that's where your concern would be, is that they're not an aggressively growing or absorbing of water plant, so then you might watch for that as troubleshooting.
Some of our best plants we grew at Pam's this year, we grew in the earth boxes, and the pepper plants, they got pretty good size.
Yeah, Jim's got some good tomatoes.
Plus,